Emily stood in the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands as Mark grabbed his coat. "I'll be right back, babe. Just running for gas," he said, already halfway out the door. The sound of it shutting echoed louder than usual. She reached for a dish towel, trying to ignore the quiet that settled. Less than a minute later, a knock. Quick, precise, almost polite. Emily paused. It was too soon for Mark to be back. She opened the door. An old woman stood silently, draped in a gray shawl, eyes soft but intense. She said nothing, just extended a small, unmarked envelope. Before Emily could speak, the woman smiled, nodded once, and turned down the street, without a word. Emily stood frozen. Then a voice. I didn't know it yet, but those next 10 minutes would change everything. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. A week earlier, things looked the same on the outside, but everything felt quietly wrong. Emily, now 10 years into marriage, had mastered the art of pretending. Mark had been loving once, thoughtful, present, but somewhere between building his repair business and chasing invoices, their connection began to fray. It wasn't a fight or betrayal. It was the slow, silent kind of erosion you don't notice until your bones ache from carrying the weight alone. Every morning, she slipped into the same apron to bake bread and cinnamon rolls for local orders. Dough under her nails, flour in the creases of her hands. It brought in just enough to help, but not enough to breathe. Mark, 35, worked long hours, his hands always grease-stained, his words growing shorter with each passing day. They barely spoke. He came home tired. She stayed weary. He forgot their anniversary last month. She ate dinner alone most nights, her plate across from an empty chair. Sometimes she'd open the banking app and stare at the numbers, hoping to feel something other than dread. No yelling, no insults, no slammed doors. Just distance. The kind that shows up between two people still sleeping in the same bed, but living in different worlds. This is how marriages break. Not with a roar, but with 1,000 unsaid words. Emily turned the envelope slowly, her fingers tracing its edges like it might bite. No name, no writing, not even a stamp or seal, just a blank cream square, impossibly light and oddly warm, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. She hesitated, then peeled it open. Inside were 20 crisp $100 bills, perfectly stacked. Her eyes widened as her breath caught. $2,000? Tucked beneath the money, a torn note, the edges jagged like it had been ripped from a larger letter. The handwriting was careful, feminine, strangely familiar. It read, "You stayed when you could have left. Don't forget who you are." Her mouth went dry. The room suddenly felt smaller. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Who would send this? And why now? She rushed to the window, yanking back the curtain. The woman, the old woman in the gray shawl, was gone. The sidewalk was quiet, motionless. She stepped outside, barefoot on the cool porch, scanning the street. Empty driveways. No footsteps, no cars, no gray shawls gently catching wind. A minute passed. Then 2. Nothing. Emily turned back, dazed. She left the envelope and its mysterious riches on the kitchen counter, like it might burn a hole through the laminate. Later that day, seated beside her neighbor on the porch swing, she casually asked, "Hey, did you notice anyone walking around here earlier? Maybe an older woman?" The neighbor sipped her iced tea, squinting. Nope, haven't seen a soul all day. Emily nodded, forcing a polite smile, but the chill in her chest deepened. Who was that woman? And how did she know? As the sun dipped below the rooftops, Emily had a feeling that whatever had just happened was only the beginning. Emily sat at the edge of the couch, the envelope still in her lap, like it might disappear if she blinked too long. The note lay open beside her, its curved handwriting echoing louder than any voice in the room. And just like that, the memories came rushing in. The night she almost left, a suitcase packed with no destination, trembling hands hovering over car keys. Mark, asleep in the bedroom, unaware she'd stood at that door for nearly an hour, daring herself to go. The months of quietly juggling overdue bills, shifting money from envelope to envelope, Googling how to get out of debt without ruining your credit at 2 a.m. Family dinners where she smiled too wide and laughed too hard, just enough to keep people from asking real questions. The way her name had slowly dissolved into just Mark's wife, like she never had a life before them. All of it stacked inside her like bricks, neat, heavy, quiet. Yesterday, only yesterday, she'd whispered into the drainage steam as she folded laundry, "If there's someone out there listening, send me a sign." She hadn't been crying then, just tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Now, in the soft glow of the late afternoon sun, her hands trembled as she picked up the note again. "You stayed when you could have left. Don't forget who you are." Her throat tightened. Was this really happening, or had she finally snapped under the weight of too much silence and too little love? She looked at the open envelope, the faint creases in the paper, the flawless bills she hadn't dared to count again. It wasn't just the money that shook her. It was the feeling that for the first time in a long time, someone saw her. Emily stared at the envelope like it was ticking. Her heart whispered fate, some divine hand reaching in just when she was about to fall apart completely. But her mind, it screamed louder. Scam, trap, trick. Why $2,000? Why exactly the amount she'd been stressing about for weeks? Enough to cover rent and the vet bill for Murphy, their 12-year-old golden retriever who hadn't eaten in 2 days. It was too specific to be random, too clean to be safe. She stood, turned the envelope over again, then again. She brought it up close to her face as if some invisible ink might appear. Nothing. No return address, no watermark. The paper was thick but plain, the kind you'd find at a decent stationery store. She gently unfolded the note again, rereading each word through a skeptical lens. The handwriting was soft, flowing, not rushed, but unfamiliar. Emily ran her fingertips over the paper, half expecting a smudge, a fingerprint, anything. Nothing. And still, something about it all felt unnervingly personal. She sat back down, mind racing. Could this be someone she once helped? A customer from her baking orders? Someone she'd counseled during that short church volunteer stint? Had she unknowingly paid something forward years ago, and now this was the universe paying it back? Or was that just wishful thinking? Emily didn't know the answer. All she knew was the envelope was real. The money was real. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible anymore. But did that make it a blessing or a trap she couldn't see yet? Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just strange. It was impossible. She needed answers, something to ground her. So she started where logic lived, technology. She pulled up her doorbell camera feed, scrubbing back to the exact time of the knock. Nothing. No motion, no face. Just an empty porch, then a clip of her opening the door to thin air. Confused, she checked the street-facing security cam from the neighbor's shared network. Again, nothing. No gray shawl, no shadow, just stillness. Next, she asked the mail carrier who passed their block like clockwork each day. Sorry, the woman said cheerfully. Didn't see anyone but the regulars this morning. No older woman at all. Still searching, Emily turned to the Facebook group for their neighborhood. She posted a vague question. Has anyone seen an older woman in a gray shawl delivering envelopes or anything unusual? Hours passed. Then a comment popped up. Sounds like an urban legend I heard once. The woman in gray. Emily froze. She copied and pasted "woman in gray with envelope of cash" into Google. The results weren't official stories, just message board threads, Reddit posts, barely viewed blog pages. But the pattern was there. She knocked just once. Showed up out of nowhere, handed me money, vanished. She came when I was weakest, but reminded me I wasn't invisible. Emily leaned back from the screen, hairs rising on her arms. It couldn't be. But it was starting to look like it had been her turn. Emily unfolded the note for what felt like the 100th time, her hands steady now, her mind anything but. She stared at the delicate handwriting, trying to pull more meaning from the same short sentence. You stayed when you could have left. Don't forget who you are. There had to be something more, a detail she missed. She held the paper up to the light above her kitchen table. That's when she saw it. Barely there indentations where the pen had pressed just a little harder. She turned the note over and angled it under the lamp. Light caught the pressure marks. Words emerged, faint but undeniable. This is not about money. This is about value. Her breath hitched. Tears burned her eyes. For years, she had measured herself by dwindling bank balances and dinners eaten alone. She cooked, cleaned, supported Mark's business, packed his lunch, sent texts he never replied to, and never once asked for anything back except time, which he never seemed to have. No one saw the extra shift she pulled in the kitchen, the after-hours baking to cover the electric bill, the silence she filled with smiles so no one else had to worry. But this note, this woman, whoever she was, had seen it. It wasn't about $2,000. It wasn't even about the mystery. It was about someone validating the kind of invisible effort no one thanks you for out loud. For the first time in years, Emily let herself cry, not because she was sad, but because her soul had been starving for acknowledgement, and she hadn't realized how badly. Whoever sent this note didn't just see her. They reminded her that she still mattered, that she had worth even if she had forgotten it herself. Mark walked through the front door, letting it close behind him with that familiar thud. Gas station was packed, he muttered, then paused when he saw her, sitting at the kitchen table, eyes red, the envelope in front of her like evidence in an invisible trial. "What's that?" he asked, setting his keys down. She looked at him for a beat too long. "Something strange happened while you were gone." He came closer. She explained everything. The woman, the envelope, the money, the note. When she finished, he raised an eyebrow, half laughing. "That's weird." But Emily didn't smile. Her voice cracked. "Mark, it's not the envelope. It's what it said. It saw me in ways you don't." His face fell, confused. She stood now, near tears. "I feel invisible, Mark. I'm tired. I've been tired, for years, and I didn't even realize how much until someone I don't even know acknowledged it." He sat, slowly. "Em, I don't need gifts. I need you. I need to feel like what I do matters, that I matter." Silence stretched across the room. He looked down, then up. His expression softened in a way she hadn't seen in years. "I didn't know you felt this way," he said, voice low. Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't either. Not until today." He reached for her hand, shaky, unsure. They talked, quietly, honestly, the kind of talk they hadn't had in years. It wasn't a neat resolution. Problems don't vanish overnight. But it was honest, and it was real, and sometimes that's where healing begins. Weeks passed and life didn't transform overnight, but something inside Emily had. She started waking up before the alarm, not out of duty, but out of quiet excitement. Her hands, once tired from routine, now baked with purpose. Orders picked up, but she made time for walks, books, even silence. Mark changed too. Slowly. He started washing dishes without being asked, sat at the table while she baked, just to talk. They attended their first counseling session the following Tuesday. It wasn't perfect, but it was effort. As for the money, she'd kept half to breathe a little easier. The other half went quietly to a local shelter for women who needed reminders just like she had. She still never figured out who the woman was. I don't know who she was. Maybe a spirit, maybe an angel. All I know is someone saw me before I saw myself. One morning, on her way to the market, Emily passed a woman in a gray shawl on the sidewalk. They didn't speak, but their eyes met. The woman smiled. So did Emily. And this time, for the first time in a long time, she smiled for herself.